without any further request to Arash to please take the stage. As we switch to the other question, what is this discourse on science, religion, and development? How many of you are social science students? Okay. And we also have engineering background. Okay. So I think all of you could find this theme of today's workshop to be extremely relevant because as you know, the enterprise of development has been one that began throughout the world after the Second World War. You see, before the Second World War, the world as we knew it at that point was very different from what we see today. We did not have nation states. They were mostly governed by large empires. And what happened after the Second World War was that many of the former colonies in Asia, Africa, Latin America became free. Europe was destroyed because of the war. And an issue before humanity was now all these people living in these different parts of the world who have their destiny in their hands. How do they, first of all, what is their vision of development? What does it mean to develop as a people, to advance, to move ahead? And the second question was, well, how to advance? So, as it happened, at that point of time, those who dominated development theory, the thinkers, the leaders of thought, who proposed the vision of development, were thinkers who gave importance only to economic development. Their vision of development was materialistic. In other words, what they believed is that if we provide capital, resources, infrastructure, in other words, if we modernize society, everything else will come in train. Culture will modernize and improve, values will emerge, people's sense of well-being will be enhanced, they will get along with each other once they have more resources, conflicts will end. But unfortunately for humanity, nearly 70 years of applying this materialistic vision of development has actually resulted in a situation where poverty has increased. We live in a world today where nearly 1.2 billion people don't have the means to live a dignified life. They cannot send their children to school, they cannot access good health care, they cannot live like dignified human beings. And so the question is, where did we go wrong? What happened that so much of billions and billions of dollars and rupees of investment, application of the best minds in the sciences, the best intentions, all of this actually made the situation worse. And so sometime around the 90s, in 1990s, there was a lot of soul searching in the development community. One segment of thinkers said maybe the answer is just forget about the poor, focus on the smart cities, increasing access to global economy and agriculture, rural livelihoods become collateral damage. So you find people will die, but that's the only way. So that's one segment, influential segment of thinkers abandon the poor. In fact, if you see, compared to the 70s, if you see the discourse on development today, it's no more about poverty. It's about human rights. It's about gender issues, which are all valid. But the issue which humanity was considered the most fundamental, which is people don't have means to live a dignified life, has somehow been given up by a significant section of the development community. But these were not all. There was also a segment of development thinkers who said maybe there was something wrong in the way development was conceived. Development in the sense of merely treating human beings as a bundle of needs, seeing a person purely in terms of what they need to survive is a very limited definition. And they say that definition of development does not connect with the masses of human beings, because masses of people don't see themselves as animals. Maybe very intelligent animals, but still this definition eventually does not see human beings beyond their material reality. And so these thinkers started to explore and carry out research to see what is it that the development paradigm of the time had somehow missed out. And an influential section of these thinkers started to explore the role of religion in development. The reason for this was that they realized that people's sense of who they are, their sense of themselves as civilized human beings, what it means to be good, their sense of justice, their sense of decency, is they found very closely connected to their deepest convictions about the universe, about who they are, their purpose of life, which for the majority of humanity comes from their religious conviction, their spiritual conviction. The reason why people, despite being in great poverty, would not steal, would still not harm others to fulfill their own needs, was because their behavior was held in check by their conviction that they are not just material beings. They can't behave like animals. There is something that compelled them to live lives of honor. And closely tied with this was the social dimension of life. People saw themselves as social beings. Their sense of purpose was very closely tied to their bonds of family, to their community. Even in situations of acute want, lack of resources, people still could live happy lives because their sense of joy came from the relationships they shared with others, the happiness that friendship brought, the support that they gave to each other. Then they also found culture is an extremely important segment, and all of these are somehow tied to people's religious conviction. So, in the late 1990s, a discourse was initiated within the development community. The World Bank got involved, IDRC got involved. Many agencies around the world started to explore and initiate dialogue on the question of how do we bring in religion without bringing all the fundamentalists, the superstitions, all the problems that we see in today's world with the system of knowledge. But how do we acknowledge, in other words, this tremendous role that religion plays in the lives of humanity? One train of one stream of that discourse focused on science, religion, and development. And they started to explore how true development can only be achieved when human life is viewed in its totality. And its totality encompasses material and spiritual. You cannot ignore either. And research and dialogue started to advance. And in India, we had a colloquium involving international agencies, the government. This was in 2000. Many NGOs, academic institutions. A lot of thinkers got involved because they felt that this discourse started to address something which they always felt, but they never had a space in which to talk about. And there was a tremendous excitement and sense of joy about moving forward with this discourse. And now it has been almost 1.5 decades that we've had this discourse, not just in India, we've now had it in Uganda, in Brazil, Colombia, Malaysia, different developing countries around the world where people are thinking about viable visions of development and ways to achieve it. And some of the fruits of these interactions and the learning and the research you can find in some of the studies which are over here for your reference. So this was meant to be an introduction. It probably went a little more than that. Anyway, so what I will give you over the next 40 minutes or so is an overview of the essential ideas of this discourse. So as I mentioned, we start out with the realization that there have been many approaches that have been tried to address the issues of development in the last 50, this is 50, but now it's more than 50 years. In India itself, we tried almost every theory that came from, including Gandhian model, the neoliberal model, almost every approach to addressing the challenge of development has been tried. And it's not like they all failed. We learned a lot over these past 5-6 decades. A lot of time, energy and resources has been invested. And we have made a lot of progress in many areas. Yet the stark reality is that the goal of bringing some level of material prosperity to the vast majority of human beings has not been attained, which is what I was referring to earlier. There is a widening gap between the rich and the poor. 20% of the world's population has access to 84% of the world's wealth, and 1.2 billion live in absolute poverty. In fact, you will your own city, if you go out on the roads of Indore, you will see how much development has actually widened this gap, where one segment of the population is dramatically advancing economically, and the large number of others are just left to themselves. Here, this is a picture of what the world is moving towards. This is not the world that we were hoping for. Even in India, if you look at in 47 when we had our independence, the idealists that we had at that time, those who, for example, framed the constitution, the kind of thinking that there was a lot of hope. Today, if you look at the discourse of development in the political environment, there's a lot of cynicism. People actually don't believe. If you read through the lines, the sense you will get is that people have lost faith in those fundamental ideals. The feeling is that we need to say all these good things, but they will never be achieved. Unity, oneness of the country, there is a sense that there will always be conflict, that there will always be challenges between different communities. Justice, again, there is a sense that somehow, well, this is a good idea, but in reality there will always be a lot of people who will just be unlucky to be, in the wrong side and to suffer injustice. So our discourse has actually changed to the point where we don't really mean a lot of the things that we talk about. Fundamentally materialistic view of existence, which has essentially ignored the spiritual nature of the human being. Materialistic development paradigm has proven not only insufficient but fundamentally flawed. A new paradigm needs to emerge if we are serious about achieving these development goals. It's not just a question of finding, there are different ways to view the situation. One is to say that our vision was right, but there is a problem in implementation. And if only we can find a way to make our implementation efficient, what we are hoping for will be achieved. But if we actually look at the situation more deeply, we see that the vision itself was flawed. That the vision was leaving out from consideration a large piece of the puzzle was not taken into consideration, which is what people think about themselves as human beings. So this discourse has been initiated among academics, development practitioners, in order to learn about how we can have, come up with a new vision of development and advanced learning on, individual and social transformation, which is what development is really trying to achieve. And in order to do this, those in this discourse realize that an impact can be made through influencing public opinion as well as policy. These are some of the fundamental ideas of this discourse. Man is essentially a spiritual being a little about this. When we say spiritual, again we are not talking about a conception which is based on superstition, or it's not an unreasonable conception that we are putting forward. When we say spiritual, what we are saying is that human beings fundamentally have a transcendent view of themselves. The material conception of the world is what we understand as our spiritual concept. It is not something that we can define the way we, for example, can, you can take a physical object and talk about its properties, its weight, its color. Spiritual realities are not accessible in the same way. They cannot be described in the same level of precision in which you describe physical objects. But spiritual realities nevertheless are felt by, for example, a sense of love, attraction to beauty, a sense of our own mobility. You see, these are spiritual attributes. These are qualities, attributes which go beyond a purely physical, the physical requirements of our bodies. And in any culture that we consider, we see that a sense of what it means to be a good human being is always defined in this spiritual sense. So, the discourse again is based on the vision that you say that the spiritual is important does not mean that the material has to, can be put aside. It is, in reality, we as human beings and society as a whole has a coherence between the spiritual and the material. In other words, our sense of values, our sense of who we are as a human being, our deepest convictions cannot be separate from the way we live life, the kind of work we do, the way we bring up our children, the kind of friendships we have, our relationships. It's all interconnected. Our sense of spiritual has to find expression in the way we create a better society. It finds expression in our commitment to be honest, but in sync with building a better material world. We need to advance materially, but then our advancement should not be at the cost of ignoring the spiritual value. And again, if you look at thinkers like Gandhi, for example, or those who thought deeply about development at the time of independence. You see, for example, one of the biggest questions for Gandhi when India became independent was the question was, well, you get political independence, Swaraj, which was his conception, but then you become independent to be what? You see, for example, a bird is in a cage, you break the cage. Well, if the bird doesn't know how to fly, then breaking the cage doesn't make any difference. Because its conception of itself is that I am a being that can only walk. Unless the bird has a conception of itself that is different, that it actually has the capacity to fly, it will never fly. So we got independence, like all the countries that were freed of oppression. But then we did not realize independent to be what? And the vision that was given to us or that we acquired was that finally what independence ended up being about was, being more comfortable, having better facilities, having more resources. In other words, making our society look like the most industrialized society in other parts, maybe like New York. So if our cities look like those cities, then we would consider ourselves to be advanced. But then the idea was these resources are means for us to fulfill our ideals, and somehow, but we forgot about the ideals and we just focused on getting more and more of them. In this vision, the poor also are viewed in a paternalistic way. You see, if you don't see the nobility of human beings, then in a poor person, all you will see is an absence. In other words, who is a poor person? Someone who does not have. Whereas a spiritual perspective will say a human being is a mine, is like like a mine which is full of gems, but those gems are hidden. So a human being is full of capacities, innate capacities, which are waiting to be developed through different opportunities. This view views emptiness. Where there is no material means, you can only see emptiness. So this views the discourse on science, religion and development says that the purpose of development should be to increase human capacity to generate, apply and diffuse knowledge at the level of individuals, communities and institutions. In other words, if you want me to develop, the first thing I need to have is the capacity to understand my own situation. I need to be able to know myself, who I am, what am I capable of, what are my capabilities. And then I need to understand how I can use resources, what the environment provides in order to develop. All of this requires knowledge. In order to know myself, I need spiritual knowledge. I need to have a knowledge which tells me about the tremendous potential that I have. But I also need knowledge to be able to work with others and create a better environment, advance agriculture, industry. It's not enough for me just to be a good person. So development fundamentally has to do with knowledge. And this is very different from the perspective of development which you see in the present world, which sees development as provision of economic resource. So if you want to develop a community, this vision will say, well, give them economic resources, give them money, give them wealth, and when there is wealth, then development will follow. The discourse on science, religion and development says give them knowledge and make them capable to solve their own issues, to develop in a way that is in harmony with their own culture, so that development is not something that you go and impose on a community from outside. It becomes a decision that they make for themselves. It is a path that they pave for themselves. This discourse looks at science and religion as two principal systems of knowledge that have historically guided humankind. Science provides us understanding of the way the world works. historically. You see, if you look at history, 6,000 years of recorded history, and you see what has kept human beings alive. In other words, how have human beings organized themselves as societies, built civilizations, prospered? You will find that there are these two systems of knowledge. Religion has kept human beings in check. It has given people a code of conduct, instilled a sense of morality, developed their sense of aesthetics. You see, so much of architecture are either religious temples, the most beautiful structures in our heritage, or they are inspired by certain ideas or beliefs such as sacrifice, love, which humanity has historically understood from religion. So these two systems of knowledge have civilized human beings. And what is needed is a systematic exploration of the complementary role of science and religion in development, and how they can work together in a synergistic manner to erect harmonious and equitable social systems. So, the challenge of humanity is that historically religion was the most powerful system in society till the Middle Ages. And during the Enlightenment, which was this period in 18th century Europe and North America, there were a group of thinkers who came out. I'm sure you know about this period, which was very influential in shaping our work. And they said that some of their fundamental ideas were that what should guide human progress should be reason, the capacity to reason which human beings possess. And belief in religion should be restricted to the home, to your private sphere. And all the real decisions about the direction of society should be left to economic and political consideration, which is where they saw reason has its full hold. Now, what they did, in effect, the Enlightenment thinkers, was they freed humanity from the stranglehold of the priests. Because historically that was a time when Christianity had any system of knowledge under its control. So the Enlightenment thinkers freed humanity from that grip. But they in a sense, there is a saying of throwing the baby with the bathwater. So in a sense, you got rid of the dirt, but you also got rid of the real thing as well. So they took religion out of the public sphere, and in its place they left a vacuum, because people believed in God, in some supernatural power, and that kept society together. Fear of breaking certain spiritual laws kept people in control. Now, if you take that out, what comes in its place? There was a moral vacuum. And so what came in its place was ideology. You bring nationalism, you make a god out of the nation, you bring Marxism, communism came in for a while, fascism came, the leader became a cult figure. In other words, people found different objects of worship. When you took away what religion had, it's not like people became completely free of the need to worship. They continue to worship. It's just that they switched to secular alternatives, which continues. Now you have celebrities who are worshipped. But that need remains. And that church and state or religion and state are separate. Except for maybe a few countries which have, kept religion in a very bad way, like I don't know, like Islamic Republic of Iran or some of these countries where now in the name of religion they've actually brought a lot of oppression. So what we need is a new development methodology that considers spiritual and material domains of existence as integrated parts of the process of development. These ideas are not easy. It's not going to happen overnight. But the point is, what is the alternative? You see, the fact that change is difficult cannot lead us to abandon change and continue with what we are doing, because what we are doing is taking us from one crisis to another. We have a social crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have an ecological crisis, where, you constantly see in the newspapers how the Earth's environment is rapidly deteriorating. So clearly, even the most ardent materialistic thinker will agree that the path that humanity is moving along is not sustainable. This cannot continue indefinitely. There has to be a course correction. And that change can either be conscious, in other words, we decide we want to change, or it can be the kind of change that came after the Second World War, where we had to lose 100 million lives. Half of the wealth of Europe was lost, and then we realized that you have to change. That if you don't change, you will destroy the whole race. So this discourse is about initiating conscious change, becoming conscious agents of our own transformation and the change of society. It requires changes in policies, in attitudes, and finally in implementation of development programs. Now, science will have to be seen in a sense. This is what it proposes. Scientific methods allow developing communities to become more objective and systematic in their approach to problem solving and in their understanding of social processes. Ensuring that science becomes a vehicle of social, technical and cultural progress at the grassroots of society will require a radical change in the present pattern of the flow of knowledge in the world. Now, in our world today, we still, in a sense, continue the colonial structure, which is you have the metropolitan centers of capital, which are the West, the major centers in the West, and resources, which includes technology, knowledge, flows from there to the rest of the world. It's a top-down, and from there it flows to our centers, which are the big cities, and from there it goes to the. By the time it reaches the villages, they are only receiving. You see, it's a paradigm where participation does not exist from those at the grassroots. Now, if we want science to really guide development, the scientific capacity of people at the grassroots needs to be developed. They have to be able to understand their reality, to become objective and systematic in their approach, and generate knowledge at the grassroots. It doesn't mean that you will not have knowledge flow, across different parts of the world. But that flow does not have to be one way. You see, it does not have to be one part of humanity always being recipients like an empty vessel, and another section of humanity always pouring resources and knowledge for the rest. It also requires, this vision of development requires building institutional capacity within a local population to create and apply knowledge that meets its specific needs. Because development, again, another fundamental challenge with development is the agenda for development is set by people sitting in Delhi or in Washington DC or one of these major cosmopolitan centers. And they decide what humanity means, what people living in villages, towns across the world require. What this discourse is saying is that the scientific capacity of people should be built and institutional structures need to be created at all levels so that people in the grassroots can generate knowledge which are relevant to their own condition, which address their needs, and it does not become an imposition from one section of humanity to another. What you need is a science of the people, not a science which is just carried out by the elite sitting in, institutions which are cut off from the masses of humanity. It requires technical centers of learning at the local level that can bring about meaningful and constructive social change. Now, redefining religion. Religion has been misused in the past and is associated with fundamentalism and dogmatism. We are not talking about sectarian movements. In other words, we are not talking about any particular religion. What we are talking about is religion as a system of knowledge that a majority of human beings have. It is a system of knowledge that they grow up with, that gives them the principles by which to live. We are not talking about religion as a system of dividing people. We are talking about the most fundamental principles which all religions have, which talk about coexistence, unity in diversity, justice, love, compassion. We are talking about a system of knowledge that explores the deepest motivations of human behavior and provides spiritual principles to guide action. In other words, we are talking about principles that we find in all the holy books of the world, and that has guided humanity and that should continue to guide humanity. But it has to be complementary with science. In other words, science should help us read scriptures in an enlightened manner and to draw from those scriptures principles that would be relevant to our lives today. So religion does not become fundamentalism, where I say this is it, this is what I believe, and then I'm not being scientific. That's why it's a discourse which brings science and religion together. Historically, again, one of the biggest challenges with religion, which has caused the misuse of religion, is that followers were not the ones who would understand for themselves. They would be led by a class of people. In other words, we depend on someone to explain to us, to teach us, somebody to be a guru, to guide us on the spiritual path. But what this vision is saying is that humanity is mature now. The humanity of the 21st century has the capacity to be able to go back to the wisdom of these scriptures, to understand what it's saying and apply it for the needs of the present age in a way that is relevant, in a way that is in harmony with science. It is concerned with the social order, with societal structures, processes, and the moral fabric of collective life. It leads to the stirring of the human spirit that provides energy, motivation, and insight for individual and societal transformation. You see, so many people ask this question, well, if this is the vision, then why do you talk about religion? Why not about just say spirituality, because religion has been problematic. And in a sense, just as science has been misused, in the past science has been used for creating the atom bomb, in the same way religion has also been misused for creating division. It still is misused for separation. But the thing is, if you want to transform society, you cannot only transform individual consciousness. You see, to bring about a change in society, we need to transform individuals, but also you need to transform the structures of society. In other words, if you want to create justice, you can go and tell men that they should treat women with respect, right? So you can also succeed in doing that. You can create a man who believes very deeply that he should treat women as he would like to be treated. But if you don't transform the structure of the family, then every time they meet in a family setting, the in-laws will have a say, the society will have, the neighbors will have a say, and finally, even if the individual wants to treat his wife the same, the structure of the family will not let him do that. You see? I mean, I'm talking of one example. You can think of so many structures. For example, the structure of the caste system, for example. So, transformation cannot only change individuals, it also has to change the structures that exist in society. And this is why religion, we talk about religion, because religion works with social structures. Spirituality becomes a very personal, private thing. You can't transform society with spirituality. You see, this is what it says. It is too easy to define spirituality as the failure to adequately take account of the nature of the human being is perhaps the most critical scientific omission. Here are some of the guiding principles of this discourse: unity and diversity, equity and justice, equality of women and men, moral leadership, independent investigation of truth. Now, this discourse has started application in certain areas. The first one is education, economic activity, technological growth, and governance. Let's look at some of the issues with education. What type of transformation has to occur in education? What would an educational system that accepts the coherence of the material and spiritual look like? So, if you begin to think of applying these ideas in development, these are some of the examples. For example, what is the nature of our education system? What kind of human beings is this system creating? Are we merely creating people who have a very good chance of getting, high-paying jobs in the job market? If that is what our education system is doing, then what are the assumptions of our education system which need to change? if we accept that human beings are basically driven by the desire to serve, to be of service to others, if we believe that cooperation and collaboration is how we are meant to be, not merely competition, then how would that change our educational system? If we believe that the purpose of life is not just accumulation of wealth, but it is to create a better society, a society where everyone can live in a higher level of social, cultural, economic and spiritual well-being, then what kind of education system would that give rise to? And this is something we are not just saying now. For example, if you look at NCERT, the institution which develops the curriculum for school, just the last 10 years, see the amount of focus they put on moral education in school. Because they realize that just focusing on technical education, that is making people into good professionals, is not enough, because you don't give them the other half which they need in order to be good human beings. When you look at economics, again, traditionally economics considers human beings as utility maximizing, profit seeking beings. And what we are saying is that this conception of human beings is very limited. People don't just think of profit, they don't just think of their own well-being. And now there are many thinkers who are economists who are questioning these assumptions. They talk about altruism, collaboration, competition as motivations for economic behavior. Similarly, technology. You see, how is technological choice made in society conscious of material and spiritual dimensions of life? Now, probably the most significant power that shapes our life and the life of society is technology. Every time we adopt a technology, it changes us and it changes our environment. The question is, how much of a conscious choice have we made and has society made in terms of developing technology and adopting it? Why is it that we have the knowledge today there are billions of dollars which are being invested in making mobile phones ever more fast and adding on more and more functionality. Whereas on the other hand, we don't have answers to the most basic needs of human beings, which is food. We still haven't found a way to give food to majority of human beings in our society. We don't have a means to ensure drinking water or other basic requirements of life. On the other hand, we have found an answer to how to combine, I don't know, a camera, a fingerprint reader on a mobile phone. So, whose needs are being addressed by technology? What are the values that are guiding the development of technology? I mean, efficiency. You see, why have we become a society that values speed? Why is faster always better? You see, if it's something that gives efficiency, we need to think, well, what are we valuing there? In other words, by doing something faster, what am I getting? What am I losing? What am I giving up in order to make this process more efficient? always desirable. If I value human relationships, for example, is it always advisable to keep pursuing speed in every process? Or does it make sense if you have a society that is grounded in certain social, spiritual value, would they make different technological choices? Would they choose that no, we value relationships, so maybe we create this technology, but we create it in a way that it doesn't affect the way we deal with others? Or we first develop technology for those purposes which our society needs the most. So we don't become the society we are today in India, where villages don't have food, they don't have water, but they have mobile phones. Or they have TV sets, but they don't have electricity, for example. So these are some of the areas where technology, science and religion would come together. Similarly with governance, how do we create systems of governance that are just, that are participatory, that involve everyone in processes of decision making, that recognize the worth of every human being, and yet are rational and are based on the learning that humanity has with systems of government. So this is it.
Happy that Arash could come today to share his insights with us, and I'm sure all of us have learned something new today and a lot of material to think about. I thank Arash one more time on behalf of everybody.